of you have already logged in. Good afternoon from Dubai. I see some familiar names. That is lovely. Good afternoon from Dubai. Now, I have no idea where you are, so write in, if you don't mind, where you are joining us from. Nadia, Shabazan, lovely. Egypt, Pakistan, Nigeria, Iran, Ukraine, Mauritius. I always get very excited when I see that because I have to think back to my holidays. Russia, Siberia, Nigeria, Nepal, Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Virginia from Dubai, great. 7 o'clock is sort of dinner time for us, isn't it? But Uzbekistan, great. Thank you so much for typing that in. It's always nice to know that I'm not alone in this room, even though it always feels a little bit lonely. Iommi is sitting here staring at the screen. So India's joining us as well. Fabulous. Good. So, Kuwait, lovely. I'm going to get started. I think a lot of familiar names, so some of you already know what we will be doing and who I am. We're looking at writing task 2 academic and general training tonight. And as you can see on this slide, I'm Anna, and they call me an IELTS expert. I work for IDP as a trainer, and I work a lot with teachers nowadays, not so often anymore with my students, but I still have a few students here and there. So good. So very nice to see that you've already found that chat box, because we don't need to test this because you've already written down where you're joining us from. So I'm going to skip through that. The other way why I think the chat box is very important for us to note is that you can ask all your questions in the chat box. So while I speak to you, sometimes you might see me stop and read a longer question that you've typed in. I do my best during the webinar to answer all the questions you type in. Sometimes I won't, because I know I'm going to talk about in the next slide, for example. But at the end of the webinar, take about 2 hours maybe for the webinar, and then hopefully we have some time left for questions. So if I haven't answered your questions, type them in again at the end of the webinar, and then hopefully I'll give you the answer then, because I'm here for you tonight to put those dots on the I and get you ready for your writing test. Good. And if you've joined us on Monday or on Tuesday, this is probably a very familiar screen for you as well. This is the last webinar this month for writing, and we're looking at task 2. Now, then also, if you're here, Rabia, lovely, thank you for joining us. If you have joined us, you received an email from Ayo, and in that email there was a link to a Dropbox where you could download one of the booklets. It's a webinar pack. There was one for writing task 1, and there's also a booklet for you for writing task 2. So make sure, if you haven't downloaded that yet, that you either do it now or tonight, maybe after the webinar, go back to that email that Aya sent you and download this booklet. It's quite meaty, lots of pages in there, and I think it's really, really useful to read through it. It's sort of a summary of what we're talking about tonight. Some tips that you can see on the slides are in there as well, and it's just really good to go through it. If you want the booklet, say, for writing task 1, I think that link was in the same email that I sent you before. So go back to that email and check it out. Yeah? Mohammed, at the moment, I don't think there are any plans for webinars on reading, listening and speaking, but we surely pass your question on to the IDP training team. Who knows? Nothing planned yet, but hey, we can always ask. Yeah. Good. So, I can see lots of you have already joined me before because I recognize some of your names. So I'm not going to ask you what do you know about IELTS. If you have joined me, I'm going to ask you, what do you remember from the previous webinars? We spoke a little bit about writing already. Maybe there was one bit of information that really hit you that you thought, oh, I didn't know that. This was really good information. Yeah? So can you type in one thing in the chat box that you learned from the previous webinar. And if you are joining us for the first time, feel free to type in what you already know about the IELTS writing test. I'm going to just look at my screen for 30 seconds or a minute and see what you can give me in the chat box. The structure, lovely. That's really nice to see. Monica, your first time. What do you know already about the IELTS writing tests? P's, indeed, to communicate effectively in written form. And no bullet points, not in task 1, not in task 2. Nadia, nice, indeed. That's what we talked about yesterday, right? Reading your questions carefully, Mara, that is so important, particularly in writing task 2, because each task might require a slightly different approach. Complex sentences, Paulino, indeed. So avoid only simple sentences. So the structure set you want to think of course, is compound, complex, and then some grammatical variety as well. Econom, nice. 2/3 indeed for writing task 2. And the multiple S's, magic words, and or. Yes, Eric, I wouldn't really say the overview can be included, but it can sort of merge together, right? That's probably what you are trying to say. Yes, you are right. And planning, Ali, indeed, is very important. Paraphrasing, Amna, that's a good one as well, because that shows me directly the language you have. So I can actually say, right, you haven't copied, so I can see this is your own language. You have understood the question and you have the language available to rephrase that for me. Question stem words in writing task 1, indeed. You can use them, Adela, but ideally you change the word formation. So if the question stem words is there, you can use it in a noun or in an adjective. Change it if it's a verb, for example. Yeah, if you have another word for it, use a synonym, for example, because that shows me your language. Punctuation, yes. Research in task 2, Marshall. I think you're running ahead of the game, but let me say no. If you want to say something about research, you can just say according to research, but don't make up according to the New York Times on the 5th of November or quotations that you make up. That's not necessary. You're not writing a real university essay. You're writing a mini essay of 250 words to show your university or wherever you want to go that you've got the skills to express and communicate your ideas in your own words appropriately. Spell check, Chisom, yes, there's no spell check. Even if you do the computer base, you still need to check your own parts. Good, thank you for that. Now, one of the questions I saw flying by in my little chat box was, what's the difference actually between general training and academic training with regards to writing task 2? Now, writing task 2 is very similar for both. You've got the same marking criteria, but the task is slightly different. It's an essay for both of you, so you have the same format, the same structure, with indeed Sandeep an introduction, and I'm going to talk about it in detail later. The main difference, Anna, between this is that the academic is often, the question is a little bit harder to understand, whereas in general, the question is more easily to understand. It's a bit more accessible, and it's a bit more on topics that are maybe related to daily life and personal things, whereas the academic is often related to society, community-based issues. So the topic is a little bit more accessible when you take the general training. It could be about shopping, it could be about raising children, whereas the academic maybe is more about traffic congestion, pollution, and the impact of tourism, for example. Yeah? Good. We're going to talk about paragraphs, etc., etc. So follow me and ask me that question a little bit later, yeah, if I don't answer it. Good. So very quick overview. You're all familiar probably with this slide because I used it yesterday and on Monday as well. The first choice you need to make as a candidate, do you want to do the academic or the general IELTS? Now, it's often not really our choice, it's what do you need it for? Do you want to go to university? You have no choice really, you need the academic IELTS. Do you need it for immigration purposes? Maybe you can choose to do the general test. So that you need to check out, and IDP can help you with that as well because they know everything about universities and immigration processes. Yeah. What you can see here is indeed there is 4 skills, and as I said before, don't tell me there is no grammar, there is no vocabulary. All these skills include, of course, vocabulary, grammar, functional language, and pronunciation. IELTS is called an integrated test, so it's not testing that directly, but if you want to communicate and express yourself, you need to have grammar and vocabulary available. Yeah, so it's all integrated in that. Sandy, we talk about the topics a little bit later again when I get back to writing. Yeah. So as you can see here, this is the paper-based test, and you can see in the box at the right that you get 10 minutes to transfer your listening answers to the answer sheet. Now, this is where I need to spell out that there is a difference if you are going to take a computer-based IELTS test. Because now in a lot of countries in this region, you can actually choose if you want to take the paper-based IELTS or the computer-delivered IELTS. And as you can see on this slide, listening, reading, writing is all delivered on the computer. So you get your headphones on, very quiet in a little cubicle, you can see the listening questions on the screen, and you type your answers on the answer sheet on the screen. The reading, the same, you've got the reading text here, you've got the questions there, or you can swap it over. And the writing, you've got your 2 tasks. You choose if you want to do task 1 or task 2 first, and you type your answers in on the keyboard. You can see them on the computer. Paper-based, you still get a pencil and a bit of paper to write on. Now, in both exams, you get scrap paper and a pencil, so you can always use and scribble some words down if you want to check your spelling or just want to take note of something very quickly. Yeah, the exam one is exactly the same. There is no difference. It's just the mode that it's delivered in that is different. And as you can see here as well, speaking is still face-to-face. And I think that's really important because in real life, you speak to people, you need to be able to communicate with a real life person, but also it gives you the opportunity to ask questions. Yeah, when you have an exam with the computer, you can't ask questions because it's not really responding to what you say. If you do the IELTS test and you're in the speaking exam, you could ask people to repeat it. Or maybe if you don't know the word, what does hobbies mean? And then the examiner will give you a synonym of that word. Yeah. Now, ideally, don't ask what does hobbies mean because it's a bit worrying when you need to ask that, but you have the right to ask that. And if you ask for what does mean, the examiner is allowed to give you a different word. In part 3 of the speaking test, you can even say to the examiner, sorry, I'm not entirely sure. Do you want me to talk about da-da-da-da? So you can get that confirmation of that you're going to start talking on the right thing. Yeah. So that's a really nice, I think a really nice thing that you have that face-to-face examiner still there. Now, the biggest difference, and please take note and write this down if you're going to do computer delivered, the listening test, at the moment, when you do it paper-based, you write all your answers in the question booklet, right? And then you need to fill in the answer sheet that goes to the examiner. Now, when you do the computer-based, you're already typing your answers in on the screen. So at the end of the listening, you do not get your 10 minutes. You only get 2 minutes to check your answers after the listening has finished. Yeah. So you have to be really focused on when you type in the answers that you do it correctly or as correctly as you can, because 2 minutes to check 40 answers, that's nearly impossible. Yeah. Now, luckily, you've got a highlighter function. So when you type your answer, you're not sure, you can use a highlighter function on the screen to highlight it in yellow or blue. So you know you need to go back to that answer in the last 2 minutes to check. Yeah? Good. Other big difference, as you can see here, you receive your results much quicker. At the moment, it's 3 to 5 days in many countries, and the exam is available 6 to 7 days a week. And in most centres, twice a day. There's a morning slot and an afternoon slot. So if you have short notice, there's more options to actually get in and sit the test than there is in some centres where you have to wait for a really long time because there's no space left on the Saturdays. Yeah, good. So I think this is the main difference. Other than that, the exam is exactly the same, but there is your spell check, your word count, of course, available in writing. So you don't have to count your words, but there is no spell check. So that is exactly the same. So I don't think there is a difference in getting a better band score for one or the other, unless your handwriting is a right disaster. If I can't read it and you've done the paper-based exam, I might see it, oh, it's misspelled, I can't read it, I have no idea what you're doing here. So you get a lower score. So if handwriting is a real issue, then I think practicing with the computer so your keyboard skills are very fluent will help you do better maybe, because at least I can read the words you've written down. But other than that, there's no real difference. Mingma, very good question. Capitalization, uppercase. In the listening and the reading, no problem in paper-based or in computer-based. Lowercase or uppercase, do whatever you like. Yeah, you're not penalized for that. In writing, you're not directly penalized, but ideally we like you to use it correctly, of course. And you'll notice that the higher band scores, like 8 and 9, often show good practice. They know when to use a capital or a lowercase. But no, even with names, we'll have no problem in the listening and the reading. Good. I'm going to move you on and move you away from my computer-delivered chats to writing task 2. So a very quick overview of my aims of what we're going to talk about today. Yeah, so we are going to review that format of writing task 2 for academic and general. Like I said, they're very similar. It's often the accessibility of the ideas, the topics might be slightly different. So it's maybe more about something that you see in your daily life around you, whereas academic is a little bit more abstract about what's happening in the world or in communities. Yeah? Then we're going to have a look at how the exam is assessed. What is the examiner actually looking for in your piece of writing? And then we have a look at some writing task 2 examples. Now, we often don't have so much time for that, but there's loads in your booklet with the examiner comments as well. Yeah, so if we don't have time to go through that, check it out in your booklet and you get an idea of what a band score 7 or a band score 5 looks like, for example. Yeah. No, Mingma, it doesn't really matter. Capital letters or lowercase, and sometimes you have the caps lock on in listening and reading. It's marked by different people as well, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, so just get the answer onto paper. That's more important. Yeah. Good. Then the last thing I'm going to do today is to highlight those language skills that we are looking for in the exam, and also highlight some common errors that we see students making. And I'm not just talking about a word error, but really about issues or errors that really impact your band score and can make the difference between a 5 or a band score 6, for example. Yeah. So good. Let's get started then. And I think I'm going to hand over to you. That's always very exciting. Good. So I've got a question for you on the next slide. Read the question and just type your answer into the chat box for me. Yeah, so the question I have for you, and you probably already know the answer. Now, do you have to complete writing task 1 before you start with writing task 2? Yes or no? This is amazing. I see all these words flying past, which is so nice. Makes us feel less lonely in this little room here. Okay, have a good look at the modal verb in my question. Yeah? It is saying, do you have to? Do you have a choice? Can you choose to do it a different way around? Yes, and I think have to means that you don't have a choice. Yeah? So the answer to this question definitely is no. It's your choice. Yeah? Now, I see some very valid comments where people are saying, yeah, but task 1 is only 1/3 of the marks and writing task 2 is 2/3, about 66.666% of the total score. That is very correct. So often we say start with writing task 2 because you get more of your band score out of writing task 2. And also writing task 2 needs often more thinking. Yeah, so when you're halfway through the exam, you might be really tired, you really have no ideas left. So you might feel that for your brain it works better to start with writing task 2. You can absolutely make that choice because both tasks are given to you at the same time in your testing booklet with answer paper, and you have 60 minutes to complete both. So whatever works best for your brain, you choose. But it's not that you have to start with 1 before you can start 2. Completely your choice. Also in the computer-based test, Shakir, because you get 1 and 2 and you click on the one you want to answer first. Ali, I would always suggest my students to try it out. So when you do a mock exam at home, I would say start with writing task 2 and then go to writing task 1. See how that feels. Next time we do a mock exam at home or in the classroom, start with writing task 1 and then go to writing task 2. And it's very interesting that some of my students say, oh, teacher, I really like to start with writing task 1 because it builds my confidence because I find it easy. Great. Do that if that's what you want to do. Some people find writing task 2 more interesting and more texting as well. So they have to put a lot of their own effort into it. Fine, start with writing task 2. So I'm not going to say it's better. I think it depends on your brain, but ideally I would say if you can, writing task 2 because it gives you many more points. Remember, 66.6% of your total score. Prabhat, are you allowed to wear a watch during the IELTS tests? I'm just looking at Aya who's saying no. You know, I did IELTS, I think about, I don't know, 2001, that's nearly 20 years ago. So I don't even know if we could wear a watch at that stage. But there will be a clock in the room in front, which is often quite large, so you can see what time it is. And there will also be a person in the room who will say, now you've got 15 minutes left. You've got 10 minutes left. So they will call the time for you as well towards the end of the writing exam. So no watch, because I think there might be lots of things speaking in those watches nowadays as well. Technology has moved on. Yeah. Good. Let's start looking then at writing task 2. I think you recognize the prompt here. Give reasons for your answers and include any relevant examples from your own knowledge or experience. And already looking at the prompt here, I think it's really important that you see the plural S's. Like we talked about yesterday, reasons, examples. And this actually shows you that we need at least 4 paragraphs when we write in writing task 2. your reasons and examples will be in the body paragraph. So quite often you have your introduction, a body paragraph with reason 1 and example 1, a body paragraph with reason 2 and example 2, and a conclusion. Yeah. So that answers one of your questions already. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think you can leave once you're finished with your task in the exam. Yeah, because you disturb other people. So you just sit it out and you just wait. And I suggest you take your time in the writing, if you have that time left, to check your spelling and check your answers. I know that when I did it many, many moons ago, it was like you've got 2 minutes left and I was still writing. Yeah, because you start to write, there's lots of ideas, you might correct your own ideas. So don't worry about leaving early. Make good use of your time. I think that's more important. Yeah. And at least for your writing task 2, 250 words. We spoke about writing task 1, 150 to 170. Writing task 2, we recommend 250 till about 270. Why not more? Because you might make more mistakes. And if you have more spelling mistakes than we think is acceptable for 6, we might have to drop you to a band score 5. You might make more grammar mistakes. But actually, you probably just don't have enough time to write more. Yeah, so just keep it onto that 250, 270, and don't count every word. I think the best way for you to see is how many words you normally have on one line. If that's 10 words, you know you want to write 25 to 27 lines in the exam. Yeah. Good. And each task, as you can see here, an essay discussing an argument, opinion, or a point of view. And we suggest that you take about 40 minutes, but you can take less. You can take a little bit more, but it takes time away from your writing task 1 if you do that second. Yeah. Complex sentences, Mohammed, the minimum amount of complex sentences. I don't count any of your sentences or errors. It's more like a holistic feel when I look at that whole piece of writing. Because, of course, when you write 250 words as opposed to 400 words, you might have a few more mistakes, but you have 400 words. Yeah. So in that way, if it doesn't really impact the message, it's really hard for me to say you can have so many errors. We just look at it in context of what you have produced. Yeah. Salutations are counted, Adiola. Yes, indeed. So, Eric, don't joke about technical issues because fingers crossed everything is going well today. Yeah. Eric is saying no technical issues yet. Well done. Yeah. So stay with us. Good. I'm going to hand over to you again. I think I've got 5 or 6 questions for you about writing task 2. Yeah? So have a look at my 4 questions, actually 5. Number 3 has got 2 questions. So have a think, type your answers into the chat box. I have a look through your questions and I'll get back to you in a minute or 2. Thank you for that. Good. A few things I saw coming past are words like a, the, the articles, the small words as I call them. Are they words? Well, actually, anything in English, even if it's one letter like I or a, if it has meaning, it is counted as a word. So yes, that is a word indeed. So it doesn't really matter so much in the writing because you can go over length. It's not so much a problem if you write more because you're not penalized on length. Yeah? But in the listening and the reading, for example, if it says no more than 3 words and or a number, you need to count that little word a or the as well as a word. So yes, very valid question there. How many compound or complex sentences do I need to get a good score? Now, again, I can't really give you an answer for that because it really depends how much you write. In general, I would say if you want a higher score, you need to start experimenting and attempting to use some complex and some compound sentences. Pen score 5, you are trying. If you only stick with simple structures, simple sentence, for example, subject, verb plus the rest of the idea, even though it's 100% correct in your whole essay, I limit you in the grammatical range and accuracy until Ben score 4. So you need to try and take some risk and try to work with compound and complex sentences. And you will see that we use them quite a lot, but they're quite short. They're just 2 clauses that we've stuck together, and they're not 90 or 100 words with 4 commas. Just a very simple structure with and or maybe with because or however. Yeah, so try to practice so you know how to make compound and complex sentences. Good. I think I'm going to take you through the answers then. Now, you already all pointed out why we need to do that. And of course, it's the weighing of the marks. But also, you need more time because you need to think of your own ideas and the language you want to use to communicate those ideas based on your experience, your knowledge, and your relevant experience. Cohesive devices, I saw lots of great ideas coming past, for example, such as, that is really to give examples. Yeah, when we look at relative clauses, at cohesive devices to give reasons, we often talk about things like one reason is, another reason, because, as a result of, and with because, I want you to write something down for me. Yeah, quite often we use because in the middle of a sentence. Yeah, so we've got a dependent clause and maybe an independent clause. We stuck it together with because in the middle, which is completely fine. But you are allowed to use because at the beginning of your sentence with a capital B. You get your first clause, comma, and you get your second clause. Yes, so go to Mr. Google and check this out because it forces you to use a different structure. It shows me that you have variety available. So you can use because in a different way as well. And it shows me that you know how to use punctuation. Yeah, so go and have a look at that and play with that. I think it's a really nice tool, actually. Yeah, now this is not about linking, but what I notice a lot when we look at exam, a lot of students are quite reluctant to use there is or there are. This is very common language, but again, check it in your piece of writing because again, it might well be a different structure to what you've used before and it forces you to use a different word order. Yeah, so you can use simpler structures, you can mix them, because it's not that we only count how many complex sentences or compound sentences you have. It's also that variety within your sentences. Yeah, lots of good language. The last question, or this question 3 actually was sort of divided, wasn't it? The instructions tell you to include relevant examples from your own knowledge or experience. Does this mean that you can use the pronoun I? And a lot of you said yes, and a lot of you said no. Well, in IELTS, remember, it's not a real university essay. We're just trying to test if you have the basics available to cope at university. And at university, they will teach you all the rules that they have about academic writing. So it's completely fine to use the pronoun I to state your opinion. I often suggest you use it in the introduction and in the conclusion again to restate your opinion. If you don't want to use I, you can say, in my opinion, to my mind, something like that, an expression in which you really clearly state what you think about the topic. Those paragraphs we talk about later in detail. I'm just going to go through these answers here. Yeah. Good. Then cohesive devices to use examples, indeed. For instance, for example, to illustrate, such as. Now, again, I'm not saying you need to use all of those, but I would say practice with 3 different ones. So maybe you're going to practice with, for example, such as, and for instance, practice using that correctly with the punctuation in the right order in a sentence. And then when you're at the exam, you don't have to think about how do I actually use it in a sentence. You've practiced it before. You're much more fluent in that writing. You just need to put your ideas there. Yeah? So select with that 3 ways that you can practice with and that you become fluent in. Namely, yes, we use that too as a little bit more old-fashioned. I think it's a bit more British. So if you don't know how to use it, Ali, don't worry. You don't have to. There's 3 other really good ones in there. For instance, for example, and such as they're probably easier to use. Good. Now, in your writing task too, and I think this is what lots of you are asking about as well, you've got different kinds of essays. And again, they're quite similar in the academic and the general, but sometimes the question, what you need to do, is written in a different way. So let's talk a little bit more about that. But first, I like to hear from you, because I know you've all been practicing and working really hard. What different kinds of essay questions have you found in your books and on the internet for writing task 2? Yeah, indeed, opinion essay. So, for example, do you agree or disagree could be the question. What else have you found? Great use of that chat box. Thank you. Yes, to what extent do you agree and disagree? Lovely. Vladimir, I don't think we use a complaint letter in writing task 2. That would be more writing task 1. Problem solution. Advantages, disadvantages. An opinion essay, yes. Yeah, it's really nice to see that you've all got different language. You've got cause and effect, double essay, double question. There's lots of things coming past. Argumentative, Gahinda, very nice. Both views and opinions, great. Let's have a look then. See if you recognize any of these common question types or prompts that you might get. Good. So here, I think you recognize lots of those. So as you already stated before, we have different prompts. One might ask you to what extent do you agree or disagree, discuss both these views and give your opinion. Do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, or do the disadvantages outweigh the advantages? Positive or negative development. And then the last one, what are the causes and what can be done about that? That's that cause and problem solution essay, actually. And question 5 used to be mostly in general, but it's also slowly getting into the academic writing task, but it's slightly differently worded. But it's a very common one, that cause and effect and problem solution for your writing task 1. Now, just asking what page in the booklet are we on? We are looking at page 14 and page 15. And I think, if I'm not wrong, that we put everything on the same page in both booklets. So it doesn't matter if you're on general or an academic. Page 14 and page 15 have those different question types there for you. Yeah. And 16 actually goes over the page because we have put in, do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, and do the disadvantages outweigh the advantages? So it's the same question there. Safar, I have no idea what question you're going to get on September 28. It would be lovely if I had that, because I could tell all of you, but no, I can't. Hina, no, you cannot wear a watch. You have to put it in your bag, I think, when you come in. Good. So what I like to do is go through these different prompts that you can get in the exam, and then flesh out a little bit what you need to do, because I think that's really important. Because actually, they're all opinion essays, even though we describe them as discussion essays or multiple question or double question essays. They all ask you for your opinion. So let's have a look then how they work. So this is what they call them within IDP. And I think if you look at the Cambridge series, they might have slightly different words and labels, but this is what it is. It's just the label. In the end, you need to know what you are doing. Yeah? Contractions, Adebayo, yes, that is one single word. Good. So these are what we call them. We're going to explore them in a minute, but apparently I've got another question for you before we do that. Yeah? Linking words, Monica, we'll look at that after I've asked you my following question. So good. So when the examiner looks at all those different essays, which we're going to explore after we looked at the 10 descriptors, what are they looking at when they are scoring you? There's 4 different components. Can you remember any of this from the IELTS writing webinar 1 that we did yesterday or on Monday? Great, Virginia, nice to have you back. Yes. Task achievement, Vanessa, nice. Jennings as well, lexical resource, Mohammed, cohesion. I see even somebody going and writing GRA and LR. You've got the lingo. Was it Eric? Great. I think you've got this all. So let me click through so you get a very clear overview. And we can have a chat about that. Now this, I think, is again on page 9 and 10. For some reason, it didn't come out on one page. So the descriptors for writing task 2 are slightly different to the descriptors for writing task 1. Grammatical range and accuracy and lexical resource are exactly the same. Cohesion and coherence has one big change. Task response, the first one that you find on page 10, is different because it's now looking at an essay and it's not looking at a letter with bullet points or at key features and data. So most of the webinar, I'll be looking at what task response requires and how we can find that or put that into our writing tasks. But I quickly want to talk about a few things about, indeed, CC, cohesion and coherence, and LRA and GRA. Yeah. So let me start with cohesion and coherence. That comes down to the fact, like, how do you stick your sentences, your phrases together? So how do you link your phrases, your clauses in one sentence? Is that going to be with words like and, for, the fen voice, or is that with words like because, since? So they're different linkers, yeah? Subjunctive, conjunctive devices. And also, when you have different sentences, how do you link your sentences together? So what linking words do you use to make it flow? And cohesion has got to do with that sticking, whereas coherence has got to do with how easy is it to follow for the reader. So does it flow and is it logically structured? Yeah. So cohesive devices, you might want to write this down as well. It's not only connecting words like first, finally, after that. It's also words like the little words it, these, those, both. As I mentioned before, having said that, so also those chunks become very useful, and that also helps in your lexical resource. But those chunks can become really helpful to stick it together. Yeah? So references, and this is, I think, where we often read it wrong when we look at the task, the descriptors for the task, because we think about referencing as going back to Jeremy Harmer, 2015. No, when we talk about referencing in cohesion and coherence, I'm talking about words that you use to link back to what you have said before in your sentence. So a lot of pronouns, these, those, before, that, that's really, really useful there as well. Yeah. Fen voice at the beginning, not really, we don't really use start a sentence with and or but. So I would say those are really in the middle, Janice. But words like however, because, whilst, whereas, those you can use at the beginning, but you need to use that comma. Yeah? So, good. So hopefully that explains cohesion and coherence a little bit more. Another point in cohesion and coherence, which you'll find in your bent descriptors, is paragraphing. Paragraphing your ideas logically together is easy for the reader to understand. Yeah. At the bio, yes, you can start a sentence with because, but you need a comma after your first clause. So paragraphing is more important in writing task 2 than in writing task 1. Yeah. So in writing task 1, you still get a 6, 7, 8, or 9 if you don't paragraph. But in writing task 2, for a 6, you already need to paragraph. So no paragraphs, you stop cohesion and coherence at a band score 5. So it's a little bit of a game stopper. Yeah. Now, it doesn't need to be perfect for band score 6, but you need to show me that you understand the concept of paragraphing. And if you do it well with a clear central topic in each paragraph, it could be a 7. If you develop that and you do it logically as well, you could even get an 8 or a 9. Yeah? Paragraph size, Amireza, does it matter? I think the most important thing is that when you speak about a topic, that you, for example, have to speak about both opinions, right? That you don't write 110 words about, yes, I agree, and then 50 words about, no, I disagree. So sort of keep your paragraphs of equal, balance your paragraphs out. So it's not that one is super long and one is tiny. Does that make sense? Good. So cohesion, coherence, paragraphing, very important. Lexical resource, we spoke about at length yesterday. So of course, you need to show me the language, the vocabulary you have. Think about paraphrasing. Can you say the same in different words? So instead of student, you might say pupil, learner, attendee, participant. Then you also want to think in lexical resource about being precise. So not speaking about stuff, things, people. What sort of people? People that work in a hospital. Okay, are they doctors? Are they nurses? Are they surgeons? What are they? Things. What sort of things? Gadgets, items. So really think about specific nouns and also specific verbs. We spoke about this yesterday as well. A lot of times when we look at lower band scores, we see really weak verbs like do, go, find. It's not very specific, right? So instead of, for example, to go somewhere, what could you say? To attend a performance, to visit a museum. So really be specific in the choice of your verbs. I think yesterday we spoke about to do your homework. And we came out with, it might be much nicer to say to complete your homework or to finish your assignment. That's really also asking for that higher level language, which is what you need for a higher band score. Yeah. If you look at 7, 8, and 9, we're really looking at advanced upper intermediate language. So instead of talking about rubbish or bin, you might talk about litter and polluted environment, that sort of language. The other thing in lexical resource, very important, that you use collocations. Use your collocations, words that go together correctly, and show me some variety there as well. So how do words collocate? You need to know if you actually make a decision, do a decision, or take a decision. That sort of language becomes important. And as well, phrasal verbs we spoke about yesterday is maybe a little bit more for speaking. You could use a few in your writing, but think about how can I actually upgrade that language and not only use phrasal verbs because they are not so common in academic writing. They're more common in spoken form. Yeah? Fresh air, Noreen, that's a lovely collocation indeed. Yeah, it's clean air, fresh air, definitely. So in lexical resource, what I want you to think about in writing task 1 is nominalization. Yeah, so instead of using too many verbs, think about, can you change the verb into a noun? Yeah, so let me think about an example on the top of my head. The procedure instead of to process. Yeah, so you're really thinking about changing verbs into nouns, and that's very common in academic writing. Go to Mr. Google and he will explain what nominalizations are if you need a little bit more guidance on that one. But that's what we like to see, and again, that shows me that you can play with word formation as well. Yeah. Grammatical range and accuracy, that's the last 25% of your band score. Karim, type into Mr. Google collocations. It's words that more than frequently go together. Remember, heavy rain. For some reason, we will never say strong rain. I understand what you mean, but it's not correct. Yeah, good. Grammatical range and accuracy. We spoke about this yesterday. I'm really looking for your sentence structures. Are you using a simple sentence here and there? No problem. But I also like to see a compound or a complex structure. And ideally more of those two. So you can show me how you can link your sentences together, and it enhances your cohesion and coherence. See, it's very much related, all these four criterias, right? Then also in grammatical range and accuracy, think about your different structures: continuous, perfect, or simple. But go beyond that. Think about maybe using relative pronouns. I think they are really useful. And again, they help you link your sentences together. Who and which. Start to practice with those. Very useful. Yeah? Think about using a gerund to start your sentence. Swimming, shopping, raising children. Those ing instead of to raise children. Yeah? So gerunds are really useful. Conditional, if you can put a first or second conditional into your writing, show us. That'd be great. And modal verbs. Often in English, when we make or take a stance, we are never 100% sure. It's my opinion. You might not agree. So we've got the habit of making it a little bit softer. So, for example, people might say, vegetarians don't eat meat because they love animals. Well, how do you know? Yeah. So you can't say that because that's quite a generalization. So it's better to write vegetarians don't eat meat because most likely they love animals. Or it might well be that they don't eat meat because they like animals. So you use those modal verbs: seems, like, it might well be, it could be that, and it makes it softer when you write. So it's more acceptable for people to follow your opinion. Yeah. So that's another one. Whom or who. Adebayo actually often use who in writing. Whom is quite old-fashioned. It would be in a letter to whom it may concern, but also that's changing a little bit nowadays. So who and which. That's what you really need to check how we can use that. Good. I hope I've given you some clues about what you want to look at. And then, of course, the amount of errors you have in there, that impacts if you drop down from your 8 or your 7 to a 5 or a 6. Muad, that as well. Yes. Not very much in British English, but yes, in American English, they use that. And that can be used for both. It's a very safe option when you speak about, for example, animals, then you're not sure of the who or which. Yeah, very good. Can we use some people or some doctors believe? It really depends on your context. You can say some people believe, but don't keep using people throughout. Yeah, so fine to use that, but show me a bit of specific nouns as well. Alireza. Amireza, sorry. Good. I'm going to focus and zoom in on a task response with you. And I think I get a little bit of breathing time and a chance to have some water, which is really good because you've got a question for me to answer. Here it is, and type it into the chat box for me, please. Look at the task response column on page 10 in your booklet. And can you pick out the 4 essential key elements that the examiner is looking for to see if they're there so they can give you a good Ben score? Have a think, type something in the chat box, and I'll have a little swig of tea. It was a cold cup of tea, so we're going Ayo to get me a warm cup of tea. Isn't he kind? Without him, we wouldn't survive the evening. Good team. I see some beautiful answers in that chat box. Relevance, being to the point, evidence. Coherence, Funke, yes, but that's not in my task response column. You know, when you look at this, I'm only going to look at this one for now because we've noticed that here a lot of things go a little bit wrong and they really impact your Ben score quite a lot. So yes, that has to do with how you structure it, your body parts, Format, are you there? Yes. Position, Margarita, lovely. Let's have a look then, because I'm pretty sure position is in my list. Thank you. Here we go. You need to address all parts, my word, indeed. Parts is in there, position was in there, your main ideas or HADI development, you need to develop the idea indeed, and that format, which you've already talked about, introduction, body, and then conclusion. And relevant ideas, Munira, as well, because otherwise we might say they're inadequate or they're unclear, or they might even be irrelevant and not relating to the topic. Now, the danger is if you go off topic, that you use vocabulary that is not really related to the topic. And again, your Lexas will be scored lower because it's not related to the topic. Yeah, so that would actually stop you from getting a high band score if you write about something completely different because it's not relevant to the topic we have selected for you. Yeah. Good. Let's have a look then and talk through all of these with writing examples on the screen. And then if you still have any questions, Anna, ask me at the end, because at the moment I don't really understand the abbreviations you've used. Sorry. So let's go through it and let me know again afterwards what you need from me. Yeah. So format I'm going to look at first, and I think for all of us is actually quite clear. But if you're not sure, this is maybe a good opportunity to have a quick check as well. So I'm going to ask you to have a look at this question here. Yep, so you know the 250 words, you know you've got your 40 minutes for this. Trying to get my screen moving. Yeah. So here, what are the advantages and disadvantages of taking a gap year? This is maybe more of a GT question because it's very clearly asking you what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages. So the question is very accessible. I think that's the nicest word for us to use. Now, what you need to do is the following. For this answer, for this prompt, we have put some options, some different format answers in your booklet on page 12 and page 13, a little bit similar to what we did yesterday. And I'd like you to turn to those pages if you've downloaded the booklet, and then have a think which one you think is the best format for the essay. So in the chat box, type in answer A, B, C, D, or E. Go to page 12 and 13 and select the best format for the essay. Good. I see lots of letters coming past, but I see quite a lot of the letter D as well. So let's have a look then on page 12. Of course, I'm glad no one has selected answer A because that is inappropriate format because it really looks like a letter, right? Dear Khalid, yours truly. Completely fine, but that's not what we want to see. Nice for writing task 1. Model answer B, I'm glad that you didn't write that's the best one because it starts like ladies and gentlemen. So it's actually a speech that they have scripted. So that is not what we want either. C, we go back to our famous bullet points. Alice, when you go to the email that invited you for the webinar, that's where you can find the link to Dropbox and download this booklet. Yeah. So model answer C is also not what we want because bullet points, even though you might use that in a long essay at university or in a report at university, in IELTS writing task 1 or 2, we do not want you to use bullet points because we want you to show your cohesion and coherence devices. How do you link your sentence? Yeah. Now, as you can see, model answer D looks most like an essay. It's got an introduction, although we can't read what it starts with. It's got 2 body paragraphs. That's the minimum we are looking for when writing task 2. And it has a conclusion because it starts with, as I have shown. So it's sort of summarizing and linking back to what's talked about before. We don't know the rest of the language, but that's not a big deal. It's very clearly structured, the advantages and the first disadvantage, and as I have shown. So D is actually an appropriate essay, introduction, body, and a conclusion paragraph. E, well, Tibor, very interesting. In some cultures, essays do have a title and headings, but in IELTS, essay writing task 2, general and academic, do not use a heading or do not use the title. It's not necessary. Yeah. If you use one heading somewhere, it doesn't need to be a big deal. But if you use too many, it can negatively impact your band score. So I really want you to become familiar with what an essay looks like, how you build up that genre. No, don't write a heading. So D is completely fine. Just an essay. You're not introducing what you're going to do like in an article. Yeah. Anthony, you can indent. You can also use a blank line to show me paragraphing. Completely your choice, as long as it's clear to the examiner that you're trying to start a new paragraph. Yeah. So you can use both at the same time, but just make sure that it's clear. I prefer a blank line because you can always use the blank line to correct a word that you've misspelled or something. Good. So answer D, well done. And the impact of this, if you're not 100% sure what it looks like, please go and check out what an essay format looks like. Because if your format is inappropriate, as a maximum band score for me as an examiner in task response, and that's really easy because I do not look any further. Band 5, 6, 7, 4. Oh, lots of answers again here. I see 4, probably a 4. We had lots of 4s yesterday when we looked at this, right? Yeah, let's have a look then. It's often a 4 or a 5, but format is a particular strict thing because you need to know what it looks like, and it's different in different cultures. So band score 4, if your whole essay is written in the wrong format, for example, like a speech or lots of headings and subheadings or bulleted lists, then I will stop you at a band score 4. So imagine you've used lovely language, good grammar, cohesion and coherence. You've got 6, 6, 7, and then that 1, 4 really brings your band score down. It's such a shame because format should be quite easy to remember what you need to do. Yeah, for a band score 5, you might have some funny format. There might be one heading there, not a big deal, but it can still stop you. So don't make a habit of this. Just check out clearly what an essay looks like in English. Yeah. Good. So I hope that clarifies the format issue, a common error that we see in writing. Good. We're going to move on to parts. I don't know who came up with this word parts, but indeed, it's a very important thing, but it's sometimes a little bit hard to understand what it means. Yeah? So what I want to look at with you is those different essay types that you can get. And we're going to look at the question, just not at the context. We're going to look at the cursive. To what extent do you agree or disagree? And I want to find out for each of those questions what you actually need to do. Yeah, so how many parts do you need to address? Can you have one part? Do you need to have 2 parts? What are the essential components? So not introduction, body, conclusion, but what do I need to tell them? Talwa, paragraphing is really important if you want to band score 6, 7, 8, or 9. If you don't paragraph in writing task 2, you stop yourself at cohesion and coherence at a band score 5. It's a bit of a game stopper. So try to paragraph if you want to get a higher band score. Because looking at all this, you need to meet all the bullet points for each number to get awarded that band score. So if you don't paragraph, for example, I can't do much. Use this paragraphing, but not always logically. You don't paragraph, I can't give you a 6. Yeah, I'm stuck at a band score 5. So they're always rounded scores like this, and half a band score could come out of that way. No, Mohammed, you don't need to start with advantage or disadvantage. There are many different ways that lead to Rome, don't they? There's no template. Adebayo, you choose. It's completely up to you as long as it's clear that you're starting a new paragraph. Good. 4 parts, Norinta is saying for this one. While looking at this question, what you need to do, I can actually paraphrase the question for you, and you can go back to your booklet, and I think all these statements are written down for you on page 14 and further. Yeah. So a paraphrase of question A, to what extent do you agree or disagree, would actually be, do you agree or do you disagree? So if you look at how many parts there actually is one part to this question. You need to give me your opinion, and that could be 100% agree, 100% disagree. Completely up to you. I don't really care about your opinion, but I care about the language you use and the ideas you use to express your opinion there. Yeah. So you could have 4 paragraphs here. Introduction. I agree. Idea 1 plus reasons and examples. Idea 2 plus reason and example, and my conclusion. Also, you could do my opinion, disagree, reason 1 plus example, disagree, reason 2 plus example, and your conclusion. Now, you could also go for partly agree and partly disagree, which is completely fine, but look very carefully at your band score 7 for lexical resource. You need to have that lexical resource there, because band score 7 in task response means that your position needs to be clear throughout the response. So if you want to go for a balanced essay, you need to make sure that when something is positive, you use positive adjectives. When something is negative, you use adjectives and language that has negative connotation. And I think that's challenging for some students or test takers. Now, as you can see, you do not need to do this here. You can state that you 100% agree and give me 2 paragraphs. Agree, 1 topic, reason, example. Agree, 2 reason and example. Yes, Noreen, you can fully agree or fully disagree. But if you want a balanced essay, that's fine, but your language needs to match that as well. Yeah. So Nina, very good question. You can state your position in the introduction and your 2 reasons, and then in each paragraph, you're going to flesh out those ideas. I'm going to show you an example later. So I would write my position, then I give my 2 ideas, and idea 1, I'm going to flesh out in body paragraph 1. Idea 2, I will flesh out in body paragraph 2. Yeah. Yes, you can do that, Muad. You can also say, I'm going to write 5 paragraphs because I need 250 words. So I'm going to do the introduction. Some people agree. However, personally, I disagree. Topic 1, idea 1, and another idea why you disagree, and then your conclusion. So you could also have 5 paragraphs indeed, with 1 agree, 2 disagree, if that's where you stand, or 2 disagree and 1 agree, if that's where you stand. No, Ali, in this case, you do not need to. It's the magic word, or, O-R. You have a choice. So this shows us, here's the magic word, that each question needs a little bit of thinking before you write. Yeah? Titilopa, you can write your opinion in a separate paragraph, but it's maybe a little bit tricky in this one. Some people believe that increasing popularity of shopping as a leisure activity is a positive trend. I would say this is only an opinion essay, so there is not much discussion there. Yeah, so, but you can normally, in different essays, when you talk about advantages and disadvantages, surely you can have a separate paragraph for your opinion there. Yeah, there is no template that you must write it like this, but it needs to be clear where you stand, and your language needs to be clear throughout, that you maybe lean more towards one side than the other. Yeah. Very good, Noreen. If you fully agree, no need to write disagreement. Not in this question. But let's have a look then at the next prompt, and you recognize this one as well. Read the question, have a think, and type into the chat box how many parts there are. What do you need to do? In this case, the previous question, I don't know who asked this, you can actually choose to agree or disagree. This one, indeed, 4 paragraphs you could, or you could have 5, but 4 seems really right to me, Paulina. 3 parts, Eric. Nice one. I think 4 or 5 Pasma, you probably mean 4 or 5 paragraphs. While I'm looking at the essential components, what needs to be in all those paragraphs. Obioma, I think you've got that nailed there, 3 parts. So looking at this question, you need to talk about one side of the argument, which is some people believe that shopping, the increasing popularity of shopping, is positive. Other people believe it's negative, and then you need your opinion as well. And of course, this goes into your introduction and your conclusion. So I would say you most likely have 5 paragraphs or maybe 4 paragraphs. So what you could do is your introduction. Shopping is positive, some people believe, and you can state your opinion after that as well if you want to. But you have to give reasons and examples in that paragraph. Shopping is harmful to individuals. You discuss that idea, and then you also give your own opinion, what you think of that, and then you have your conclusion. Personally, I would say 5 paragraphs seems easier to me, because in the introduction, I can introduce my opinion. Then I might say some people, da 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 da. However, other people, da 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 da. Then in my third body paragraph, I said, personally, I believe, and I'm going to explore my own belief, why I think this, and some examples for that. And then the conclusion, I wrap it up and summarize what I've said. Yes, so 3 parts in 4 or 5 paragraphs. Yeah? So if you want the Ben Score 7, you need to discuss all those 3 parts. You can not only talk about shopping as a positive trend or as a negative trend. Well, when you write an essay, Ali, who are you writing an essay for? An essay quite often is formal, right? So it's not like in the letter writing that you have a choice. Essay writing is normally formal language. That's why we don't use a lot of phrasal verbs, but you do see a lot of nominalizations and collocations and more advanced upper intermediate language. Anikuma, yes, you could, but I would say introduce your opinion in the introduction and restate it in the conclusion, because for a Ben Score 7, your opinion needs to be clear throughout the essay. So if you only introduce it in paragraph 4 before you do your conclusion, I don't know how clear it is throughout. Your Ben Score Safa, if it's less than 250, it depends how much less it is. It could, in the past, it would make a difference. At the moment, we're not really penalizing you directly anymore if you're under length, but you're probably not fully developing your ideas and probably not fully meeting the criteria for task response. Yeah, so it could well impact you for maybe 1 Ben Score in task response or more. Amna, that is right. Yeah, you can, but you need to clearly state why you think it is like that. Yes, so I would say you don't have to just choose one side here, give your opinion and say where you stand, even if you don't believe it, because it's not an academic essay university where you need a balanced counter argument. Good. I'm going to move you on. So this is already showing us that each question might need a slightly different way of thinking before you start writing. So what you need to do is analyze the task, decide what are the components I need to talk about in my introduction, body, conclusion before you start writing. So have a look here, read this prompt and the question and tell me how many parts there are. Great, there's some lovely questions coming up there as well. Good, so in this question, there are 3 parts. Yeah, it looks like there are 2 things that you need to do, but there's actually 3 things that you need to talk about. Yeah? You need to talk about why shopping is so popular. And then you need to discuss the impact this has on individuals and society, and you need to give your own opinion. So your opinion, of course, comes back in why shopping is so popular. And this, again, is a very good example of a general training task because it's asking you very clearly what you need to talk about. Why is shopping popular? Give me reasons. In those reasons, you want to give your opinion. So what you could do is like, shopping is an extremely popular pastime in my country for several reasons. One of the reasons, another reason. However, personally, I think the main reason why shopping nowadays is so popular is because people want to look good for Instagram and selfies. I'm just making this up, but you see what I'm looking at, right? In your reasons, you can use a little sentence like, personally, I believe the main reason why shopping is so popular is... Here you're clearly stating your opinion, why you think shopping is so popular. Yeah? Then talking about the effects, there might be various effects on the individual, there might be effects on the society, and again, you can maybe say the main impact it has on individuals, I believe, is da-da-da-da. So again, you can put your opinion in there. Now, what you need to be very aware of in this question is the word "and." So if you only talk about the effects of increased popularity of shopping on individuals, you are not fully answering the question. You also have to talk about the impact it has on society. So you could as well here have an opinion that is maybe a little bit, it depends. Because you can say it's very positive for society. Money goes around, people have good businesses. However, it might have a negative impact on individuals because they spend more time in the shopping mall than they spend with their families at home. So here you can again put your opinion in and you can have a balanced opinion. Muaz, in a way, it has got 4 parts. The why that shopping is popular, the effect on individuals, the effect on society, and your own opinion in all these parts. Yes. So what I'm trying to show you here is that you really need to think and read carefully before you start to write. Yeah, so when you're in the exam, stop, think, plan, and then start to write. Virginia, this is a really good comment. So you must always talk about your opinion, even when you're not asked for it. Good. Looking at writing task 2, these band descriptors or the criteria the examiner uses never changes. So even though they don't ask Sarah for your opinion, this is checking. Right. Is there a clear position? Is there a clear opinion? Ben scores 7, you need to have a clear opinion. Ben scores 6, you might be unclear or repetitive, but there is something like an opinion in there. So if you only say some people believe, whereas other people believe, and you're not saying what you believe, you cannot go above a certain Ben score. And I think that Ben score, again, is often a 5. Yeah, or a 4, as we said before. No, that question might come up later. I'm not going to give the answer away. So this is why I said before, I don't really like all the different labels the course books and materials give to the essay, because every essay, in a way, in IELTS Writing Task 2, for general or academic, is an opinion essay. Even what the discussion questions, you discuss one side, then the other side, and then you need to say, where do you stand? And honestly, if you don't have enough to say about where you really stand with your heart, choose the different opinion, because we're not judging you on your opinion, we're just judging you on the language that is in there. So choose where you have the most to say and start and go in that direction. Don't feel you have to follow your heart in this case. So that's not key. Good. Wow. Mercy, I don't know what the problem is with the handbook, but you should be able to download it. So PDF Adobe opens that handbook for you as well. Maybe it's the internet that's a bit slow. Yeah. Tala, I would say yes. Pick a site, make it easy, because it doesn't say that you have to give a counter argument. When you have to discuss both sides, of course, you will say you agree more with this than you agree with that. But keep it simple. Yeah, so give your opinion, and easy is often that you choose one side. What we notice, again, looking at example essays and at higher Ben scores 8 and 9 have very good language, so they can clearly sit on the fence, have a little bit of both, and still be clear throughout the essay. But if you not have a clear position throughout, because you don't have the language, you don't really know positive, negative connotations of the adjectives, then you're much better off choosing you agree or you disagree, more with one than the other. Yeah. Good. So there's another question here for you, and this again is more like a general essay. The question that is asked is more general. So have a look, how many parts do you think there are? What's that mouse? Yeah. Two, yes, but look very carefully at my word "and" I've just highlighted. Yeah, Ferry, you're talking about the layout, the structure, right? Moyin, it is a bit of a tricky one. Now, what you need to do here again is read very carefully. In many countries, people are eating more and more unhealthy food and taking less exercise. So there's two things here. Yeah? Then you need to talk about the causes of this. So your causes, you need to think about causes for maybe eating more unhealthy food and causes for taking less exercise. Then also you need to think about suggestions, how this can be solved. Yes, so suggestion for how we can stop people eating more and more unhealthy food, and a suggestion how we can make sure that people take more exercise. And of course, within that, there is your opinion as well. So you could say 4 parts or 5 parts, because causes, suggestions, and your opinion in there as well. So here you could talk about introduction, courses of both. Yeah, so you can talk about both with the courses, you can talk about both and your suggestions. And in those suggestions and courses, you can say, however, personally, I think the main course for this is the best solution for this would be, and then you could have your conclusion. Yeah? If you want to do it differently, that's completely fine. You can talk introduction, courses of eating more and more unhealthy food, and suggestions, courses of taking less exercise and suggestions, and then your conclusion paragraph. So definitely say 4 paragraphs or 5, and your opinion needs to be in there quite clearly. Yeah? So here, what do you think are the courses and what can be done? Is actually asking you for all these things related to the 2 things in the topic. So read carefully, circle words like and all and plural s's. Yeah? I think we've got one more. Now this is more of an academic essay, and mainly because the way the question is formed. Again, have a look. What do we need to do? Sheena, you can choose. You can put your opinion in the courses and your opinions in the suggestions. And I think that is a nice idea to do it. So I wouldn't create a separate paragraph for that. It seems more logical when you integrate it. Shakir, you don't have to make up statistics like 74% of the population in my country. I would just be a bit more generic and say like the majority of people in my country, or a large percentage of people in my country suffers from obesity because they're eating too many nice things while I'm talking during the webinar. Good, that's Ayo having his dinner. Good. So here, indeed, how many parts have we got here? You need to talk about what forms do these problems take. Yeah. So what are the problems? But very sneakily, the word outweigh, I will tell you, bon appetit. See, they're thinking about you. Good. The word outweigh is a very British word. It's a bit like a weighing scale, right? If something outweighs, it means that you have to talk about both sides. So Muad, yes, you have to talk about the problems. What are the problems? What are the benefits? And what is your opinion? So you cannot only talk about the problems, even though it looks like that in this question. The word outweigh is implying that you speak about both. Yeah. So the problems of shopping as a leisure activity, the benefits of shopping as a leisure activity, and where do you stand? Do you think it is actually more beneficial than it's negative, or do you think it's actually more of an issue than a positive? So your opinion as well. 3 parts, definitely. Or actually 4 if you look at that, what problems are they? But you're already talking about the problems. So I would say 3 is what I would say. What form do these problems take? So what are the negatives? What are the positives, the benefits, and what is your opinion? And again, look very carefully. Problems, well done. Benefits, you cannot mention one thing. You need to give more problems and more benefits as well. The outweigh, indeed, Sahra, is actually meaning, yeah, do you think one is bigger than the other? So that is asking for your opinion. It's a very implicit British way of asking you about a task. And this is what you see more of in the academic writing. They don't explicitly ask for your opinion, but you will need to give it because your band descriptors are looking for your opinion. Yes, so again, you could talk about several problems and then highlight which problem you think is the most serious one in your country. Then you could talk about several benefits maybe of shopping. It's socializing. People get to meet other people. They maybe can practice their language skills if they're immigrants. And then highlight what you think the biggest benefit is of shopping as a leisure activity. Yeah, so you can integrate your opinion in that again. Oh gosh, long name. In the introduction, the body, I would state it too, but also when you talk about problems, you can state what you think the biggest problem is. And when you talk about the benefits, what you think the biggest benefit of shopping as a leisure activity is, that it socializes people. It takes them away from the computers, for example. Yeah, they get to interact with real life other people. Good. I'm going to move you on, and I think there's one left that we need to look at. This again is very often an academic essay. The topic as well, it's about the environment, international tourism, and the word outweigh is back. Have a read and tell me how many parts there are. No, Sandeep, you can integrate your opinion as well. It really depends on how you build it up. Good. 3. I see lots of 3s here. Lovely. 4s I can accept as well, because there's another magic word in here. I don't know if I've highlighted it for you. Yes. Let me show you the magic word and then we talk again. See? Good. So outweigh, that again, Safra, is your opinion. So you need to talk about the disadvantages of international tourism, about the benefits of international tourism or the advantages. You need to give you my opinion as well about this topic. Do you think there are more advantages than disadvantages, or where do you stand? But if you only talk about the impact of tourism on the local inhabitants and not about the environment, you're still not addressing all parts of the task. So, Gina, Sarah, I can see why you say 5, because in a way you need to talk about the benefits or the disadvantages of local tourism on the inhabitants, and you need to talk about the benefits or the disadvantages of tourism on the environment. Yeah, so you could say there are 5 parts. For me, to keep it easy, I would say talk about advantages, disadvantages, and your opinion, but make sure you talk about inhabitants and the environment. So a very nice way when you see an end question like this, and if you want to have a more balanced essay, you could actually think, oh, maybe I think there are lots of advantages of tourism on the economy. So I think that it's very positive for the local inhabitants. They can run businesses, they get money coming in, the economy grows. However, the disadvantages are there too, because the environment, look at Venice, look at Rome, there's so many tourists, traffic congestions, pollution, there are lots of issues there as well for the environment. So in this way, you could actually have a very nice balanced essay. And it's just, so it really depends if we look at the impact of tourism on the inhabitants or the environment, where you stand. Yeah. So overall, you might say there's more disadvantages, because personally for me, the environment is more important than the economy. Yeah, an introduction, you could have a paragraph that talks about all the disadvantages, 1, 2, maybe 3, and some examples and reason. And then you might have a paragraph that talks about all the advantages of tourism, why it's an advantage, and some examples based on relevant experience or knowledge. And you could give your opinion afterwards if you want to, that you say, so personally, it really depends. If I look at the environment, I say there are more disadvantages to global tourism than there are advantages, because we only have one world. And then you could have your conclusion at the end. If you don't want that separate opinion paragraph, make sure you integrate your opinion clearly in the disadvantages and the advantages. Yes, Tala, that comes down to that. Give reasons and examples as well. Good, because that is what every prompt asks us to do, right? Relevant examples from your own knowledge and experience. So based on in your country, don't worry about writing in Pakistan or in Iran or in Bangladesh. Just say in your country or your community, because we don't know, looking at your number, where you're from as a test taker. All we know is the center number. So we don't know. Talk about your country, even if it's not true in your country, but for example, it happens in a different country. If it looks possible and feasible, we still go with it. But if you tell me, oh, less and less people are living in my country because there is less pollution and there's a very low birth rate, I think that might be hard to believe for most of us, because the world is changing and we know this is not happening in most places. So make sure that what you write is something we can believe. Don't make it up like you live on Mars. Yeah? Good. So, parts. I hope I have clarified what the examiner is looking for with parts. If you don't answer all parts clearly, what would be your maximum Ben score? Too much information, Ali. I think there is overload, is there? As long as you take away from this that you always need to put your opinion in and read for those magic words, then I think we move you forwards towards that Ben score 5 and above and 6 and above, hopefully. A 4.5, Tally, you would never get a 4.5 for task response. That would always be a rounded number. Noreen, you go for the 4 or 5, right? It's a Ben score 5. Yeah, you address the task partially. Then I cannot give you more than a Ben score 5. In a 6, you address all parts, although maybe you talk this much about the advantages and this much about the disadvantages of that problem. Yeah? So this is why I said try to keep it sort of equal, that it looks a little bit balanced. And in a 7, you do that quite well. It's clear, and it's also your supporting ideas are evident. Balance your paragraphs, yes, indeed. Ben score 8 or 9. I think there is an 8 in your booklet, say it later, on childhood and raising children in academic writing. Good. Now, the next question as well, and this is really important, and I'm glad that somebody said, so even if the prompt does not ask for my opinion, do I need to give my opinion? Yes, because if you don't give your opinion, you're stuck at a rather low Ben score. I see 4s and 5s coming past again. Yeah, it is actually a 4. In a Ben score 4, you present a position, but it's unclear. So you really need to show me where you stand. In 5, I can find your position, but it's not always clear, but I see there is a position. It might be a little bit vague or not very well developed, but in a 4, I'm really not sure where you stand, because you may be talking mostly about some people, whereas other people believe, and I don't know where you stand. And I think that's a major issue in writing. Yeah, that is fine. 2 advantages, 1 disadvantage if you go with advantages. Yeah. You write your opinion, Shamil, in the advantages and disadvantages. What you think the biggest advantage or the most important disadvantages? Good. So your position, we were talking about that. How do we go about introducing your opinion, Timothy? Very good question. Now have a look then at this question here. So I've given you the start of an essay. This is my first sentence, the introduction. Have a think. What kind of essay is it? How has my opinion been expressed? And what other language could you use? Yes, Amara, that is correct. It's an opinion essay. I like that answer because indeed, Mohammed, everything is an opinion essay. Yes. But out of those 6 prompts we looked at before, which one is it? Is it disadvantage, advantages? Marina, if you go under length, I can't really say because they've taken away those penalties. But if you don't fully develop your ideas, it could well be a band score 6 because it's not sufficiently developed or inadequately developed. And 5, you get some supporting ideas, but they might not be clear. So it really depends on what you do. Wellington, beautiful. It is this a positive or a negative development? That was the question. And indeed, Eniola, the writer, has written, in my opinion. Yeah, so that is also a very nice way of writing, I think, but in different wording. So my task for you, really, what I would suggest is that you find different ways of introducing your opinion. In my point of view, to my mind, personally, I believe I'm of the opinion that, all those sort of stop phrases, practice with those, and you can actually become fluent in using them. So I would say something like, to my mind, in my opinion, I'm of the opinion that, as far as I believe, as far as I consider, Ahmed, I reckon that is such an Australian, New Zealand thing. That would be something that you say and you don't write in an essay. It's inappropriate style. It's informal. So in your speaking, go ahead and use it. In your writing, don't, because it's very informal. It's what I use when I talk to my friends, for example. Contractions in writing task 2, I would say stay away from them because mostly in academic essays, we write things out. Do not, cannot instead of can't. I'm of the conception that, I'm of the belief that would probably be, to my mind, no S. Good. I had a question here for you. This was the prompt. This is what it came from. And if I talk about an introduction paragraph, I would say, I don't know who asked before, 35 to 55 words is long enough when you introduce it. And I just have to see, I'm just going to move my chat box so I can see what you need to do for me. So, good. So there was a task here because we're going to look at the prompt and work on that paraphrasing. So find the keywords in the prompt, underline them, and think, how can I say this differently to show the examiner that I have different language available. The second thing, start to think about writing a very general sentence on the topic. So I often teach my students to start with something like more and more people, or more and more young people, more and more business people, whatever. Nowadays, many people, I know it's very cliche, but those 4 words do not make the difference between your band score 6 or 7 or 8. So if that gets you started, it's completely fine. The examiner will really look at the language that comes after that, because that's just a chunk of language you have remembered, and that is not where the value of your writing is judged. Yeah, so your body paragraphs, that is really where we can see your language coming out. Nice, the majority of young people, the majority of young generation, nowadays, more and more people, youngsters, youth, Hadi, very nice word as well. The young and the old, here we go. Dozens of youths are traveling abroad. I would say a large percentage of youth is traveling abroad, because dozens of youth makes it a little bit informal. Adolescents, you could say that arena, definitely. Growth. Young individuals, Yaroslav, is a very nice one too. A large proportion, a significant proportion of the young population. Lots of great language here. Good, so start that general thesis statement, as we would call it at university, but it's a very simple general statement, and then you go and narrow it down to what you want to talk about. Yeah. So a general statement, then introduce your opinion and tell us what you're going to talk about. So another question for you. Oh gosh, it's one of those again. If you don't develop your main ideas sufficiently, what sort of band score do you limit yourself to in task response? Again, a common error we see happening a lot. Well, Ali, we're not always looking at fours. I think we might be a little bit more lenient on this one. Yeah, it's already nice that you give me a main idea, but yes, it indeed limits you at a band score 5. There's some main ideas, but they're limited. Yeah. In your band score 4, what does it state there? You respond in a very minimal way. And the main ideas are very hard to identify. Now, what you'll notice there is often that students don't have the language to state it very clearly. So even though we have those separate criteria, language can still be an issue to express your ideas, of course. Like I said before, it's very much integrated. You need to have the language to do well here. Good. We have got left the main ideas. So let's explore then how you can build up your introduction, your main ideas, and your conclusion. So here again, this is my introduction. So I started with a very generic statement. Then I showed you my own opinion. And then I'm actually highlighting what I'm going to talk about in this essay. So have a look, how many body paragraphs are you expecting based on what you read in my introduction? So far you say 3, 2 and 3. What makes you say it's 3? Where do you get the information from? So I'm not asking about the total amount of paragraphs. I'm asking about the amount of body paragraphs. And you have 3 ideas. Hadi, I'm giving you 3 reasons. Okay. So yes, you are right. What I've done here, after the general idea, after my opinion, I've given my 3 reasons that I think it's positive. Reason 1, learn about new cultures. That's going to be a topic in my body paragraph number 1. My reason 2 why I think it's positive is because it makes students become more independent. That is going to be the topic for my body paragraph 2, which I'm going to flesh out with reasons and examples. Then my reason 3 why I think it's positive is because when they study abroad, they bring new ideas back to their home country. Yes, so indeed, these 3 ideas I'm going to work out separately in a body paragraph each. Personally, I believe, I would say, Banker, there is a comma, but don't hold me to it. Mr. Google, I think there is. Good. So this shows you also how you can make coherence and guide the reader in what is coming next in your essay. So even the setup of your introduction can enhance the coherence and cohesion of your piece of writing, because you've highlighted in detail the main ideas that you will discuss in the essay now. So you don't need to write, and I will discuss this in my essay. You can. Arun, I have chosen only the positive development because the statement was asking me, is this a positive or a negative development? And I've decided that for me it's positive. And because of all the magic words, I don't want to talk about the negatives. I'm going to keep it simple. One-sided argument, and I'm allowed to do that because of the word or. Amara, you can say, this essay will discuss these ideas. Yeah, but you don't need to. It's fine if you do that. Good. So here, one more question for you. I think we already answered that, didn't we? We did already answer that. Pretty sure. trying to trick you and give you more work. I'm going to have a look then at those body paragraphs that you're expecting, those 3 body paragraphs, because some of you has asked, how do I build up a body paragraph? How do we build up the essay? So you can see here as a visual representation, an introduction. Yeah, that is a little bit longer quite often than your conclusion, but not as long as your body paragraph. So let's say 55 words for the introduction, maybe 60 or 70 words per body paragraph, and then a conclusion about 40 or 50 words. Yeah, so this is how you can build it up. I'm going to focus on your body paragraphs because we spoke about the introduction before. General idea, my opinion, what I'm going to talk about. So there's 3 things I'm going to talk about will go in 3 separate body paragraphs. So supporting paragraph 1 will be your topic sentence. Yeah, because when they study overseas, they learn more about cultures. Then I'm going to give you a reason why I think that is, and I'm going to give you an example. Second body paragraph, can't remember, that was about they become more independent. I'll give you a reason why I think it is that students become more independent when they study overseas. And I give you an example, maybe from somebody in your community or an experience you've had. Yeah. And then paragraph 3, that third point, I think it was the blue point. The webinar takes about 2.5 hours, so we're getting towards the end. But if you have to go, you have to go. Yeah. So thank you for joining us. So this is really how you build it up. And if you look at your band score 7, a band score 7 says you present an idea, which is your topic sentence. What idea was it? They gain independence. They learn more about different cultures, right? Then you extend it, and the word extend actually means you give a reason why you think that is. Why do you think they learn more about new cultures when they live overseas? Because they go to school with people of different nationalities. Yeah? And then you give me an example for that to underpin your ideas. Yeah? Idioms, American idioms, Australian idioms, British idioms, we don't use any of them really in academic writing because it's formal. And if you use an idiom that we all know and are familiar with because we trained internationally, it's fine in your speaking. In writing, use idiomatic expressions. Yeah? Good. Your conclusion about 40 to 50 words, I would say, but it's not a big deal if it's even 50 to 60, but most of your language will go into your body paragraph. Yeah? Body paragraphs, I have to say, is more than one. Good. So let's have a look. Then I'm going to show you an example of a paragraph. What I like you to do is find the topic sentence, identify the topic sentence, and then identify what my reasons are for saying this, and then identify the example I have used. So just give me the first word and the last word, for example, of the topic sentence, the first and the last word of my reasons and examples. So here, Amna, this might give you a bit of an idea what you could do. What's in it? Anthony, first sentence. Good. So indeed, this is maybe my first body paragraph. And the first sentence, the red one, is my topic sentence. It was a positive development, I thought, because when people go overseas to study, they learn about new cultures. Now, you might not understand, so I need to explain why I think that happens. Yeah. So the pinkish, whatever, I don't know, the light purple they not only learn about what other people eat and how they dress, but also how people think and behave in social and professional environments. That is really explaining why I think they learn about those new cultures. That is what they learn. Yeah? And then indeed, Sally, there's a very long example, but that is fine. This was somebody who wrote a 400-word essay, which is fine if you have the language, but it does not need to be that long. But indeed, you can clearly see the example they have used here. Yeah. So this is a very long essay, but that is fine. For me, what I really want to show you here is that you always have one idea per body paragraph. In some cultures, you use different ideas in one body paragraph. In English, we explain one reason. So we've got one topic that I want to talk about. If you go overseas, you learn more about new cultures. Why is that? Because da-da-da-da, for example. Yeah? So that other color that we had, when you travel overseas for studies, you become more independent. Why is that? Well, because you need to cook for yourself, you need to go and take a bus or a train, for example. So each paragraph, body paragraph, has one main idea that you present, that you extend with a reason, and that you then support with an example. And that is needed to get your band score 7 or above. Safa, I would say the personal experience here, she's spoken about a cousin. I would probably keep it a little bit more abstract. For example, many students who go from my country who go to the USA to study, score good jobs upon return in international companies. Arun, it depends on what sort of paragraph. If you write advantages and disadvantages, you could have 2 disadvantages in one paragraph, yes. Or you could have 2 advantages. Mm-hmm. Never personal experience. It is asking you, Chine, to build on relevant examples and knowledge from your own experience. Yeah. So I would not talk about myself, because that's not what we want in writing task 2. I would not talk about myself in speaking task 3 either. So ideally about people in your community or people in your country. I would say don't talk about your cousin here, but this happened in this paragraph. If the rest is fine, you could still say that is a very good band score, possibly a band score 9. But ideally, keep it a little bit more abstract. Long examples, Ali, it really depends. This was like a 400-word essay, so it worked out. It was all quite long and balanced because this was a very effective writer. Yeah. So good. 1 paragraph introduction, 2 or 3 paragraphs, and there is 1 more paragraph needed. The conclusion. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Ali. Indeed. So we need to write a conclusion as well. And in your conclusion, I'm just going to quickly summarize. You would start with a linker, and I'm pretty sure you know what sort of linkers you can use in conclusion, to conclude, to sum up, in summary. Page 34 in your booklet has lots of examples here. Again, pick 1 or 2, practice with using them. So you use them accurately, you have your punctuation ready, you don't need to think about that in the exam. To recapitulate, very formal genders, you could definitely use that. I usually go for something simpler because spelling is easier when you say in conclusion. Yes, you can use British spelling, American spelling, no problem, Saeed. It doesn't need to be consistent. However, what we'll notice, higher band scores often are, but it's not a problem if you mix American or British, as long as it's correct in one of the world Englishes. Yes, to sum up, in summary, to conclude, in conclusion, look at page 34 in your booklet later on to see some examples. And then what we suggest you do is you go back to your opinion, you restate it in different words, and you sort of summarize your main ideas that you've spoken about above. So there's no new thinking, there's no new ideas, but you're showing me that you can paraphrase very clearly. So let's have a look then what we have done here. So this was the introduction, right? And then here is the conclusion. Seeking education in different countries instead of saying going abroad to study. Same, but you're showing me variety in that language. To wrap up, Mohammed, I like that, but I think it's a little bit informal. I would maybe say that, not really write it in an essay. Then again, in my opinion, we've said, as I have discussed, and this is a lovely chunk that enhances your cohesion or coherence, because it's going back to what you have said before, as I have discussed above, you could even say, yeah, this is beneficial, positive, because, and there you have restated the three main ideas from the introduction in different words. So you're not adding anything new, you're showing me, wrapping it up indeed nicely in different words, and some lovely collocations, a fresh perspective to gain in independence. Yeah, to become familiar with. That's lovely language. In a nutshell, we were talking about that the other day as well, isn't it? I think it's quite informal. I actually wouldn't, I would just keep it boring, keep it safe, in conclusion, to conclude. Simple. Yeah? So this hopefully shows you how your introduction and conclusion link and wrap it up, and that what you've done in the middle is actually fleshing out those three ideas that you introduced before. So before you write, stop, think, and plan, because this will really help you with your cohesion and coherence. What else have we got then? Oh, here. I've shown you the different colors again to make it a little bit clearer. I don't know, Rahimov, why you preface the topic. I think it just flowed better. In conclusion, you could even say in conclusion, the reasons I have discussed above. I don't know. I think it just flows better. I need to look at the whole thing, why you've done it like this, but it's completely fine. Yeah, you gain in independence, or you become more independent. So there's good word formation here. The booklet link is in your email, Alice. This essay will discuss, Aniela, you don't need it, but if you want to write this, you can say, as I will, in my opinion, this is a positive development because I will discuss this further in the paragraphs below. Could be an issue. I normally say, don't worry about it if you have enough words, you know. Good, Ebru. I think many people have to leave soon, so I am going to wrap up very soon as well. I've got one more question to bore you. Or paragraphing. Writing task 2. Can you remember what I said about the importance in writing task 2 for your paragraphing? No, it's not a 4, Mohammed. There are lots of 4s, but I don't think there is a 4 here. 5s, I see some 6s tentatively. Yeah, so if you don't paragraph in writing task 2, I cannot give you more than a band score 5 for cohesion and coherence. So imagine the mess. You haven't given me your opinion. We stop at the band score 4, right? You haven't done any paragraphing. You stop at the band score 5. Your language is beautiful, is 7. Your grammar is great as well, 7. But it really pulls your scores down. Noreen, you don't need to write research figures. Just say the majority, or as is well known, or based on research, according to research. Don't make up numbers. Just speak about a minority or majority or a large percentage of the population. Yeah. If you don't use good paraphrasing, Sandeep, your lexical resource score might not be as high as it could be. Yeah? So maybe you're a bit more limited there in your vocabulary, but you might just be adequate for the task with some uncommon vocabulary, but maybe you wouldn't be sufficient or wide range. So you could maybe get a 6. But again, I need to look at your whole piece of writing there. Writing strategies, IELTS, Liz and Simon, they have used different techniques, but I don't think there is a best technique. You need to see what works for you, but make sure that you address all the points that the task response is asking for. Paragraphing, blank line. Noreen, that's fine. Yes, majority, a large percentage, a small part of our population. Yes, I think that is much more general. Because how do you know that this number is 37.8%, right? Good. Now, I've hammered on this a little bit. You need to stop, think, and plan before you write. So here are some guiding questions for you. First of all, find out what's the topic. Yeah, is it only about the impact of tourism on the local inhabitants, or also on the environment? So how many parts are there? Do you need to speak about both? Can you speak about one side only? Do you need to discuss both? Do you need to give courses, solutions? Then you need to think, what's your opinion? And there is no wrong or right opinion. We don't care as long as your reasons and your examples match what you say. And then you might want to think about language you've studied before that you can use to paraphrase the introduction, and that you can use to vary the language that you're going to use in your essay. No, I think, Tala, what I'm trying to show you is, for a good score in task response, you do need all those elements. And this is probably the most common issue. We don't get an opinion, it limits you. Yeah, we don't get all the parts addressed, it limits you. So this is why we decide to focus in this webinar on task response, because we get a lot of beautiful writing, which is quite solid, but it's not addressing the things that we need to see in task response. And then you limit your overall band score. Good, so here are your questions. Here's a possible structure, as some of you were asking for that as well. We talked about this before, but you get a bit of a better view. Samia, every paragraph needs an idea, one main idea, a reason, and an example. Better examples, Hadi, I would say read about the world if you do the academic one, because it's often about environment, health, about sustainability, about raising children, about education, all those topics that we read in the news. A website to develop lexical resource. Noreen, reading. I don't know anything on the top of my head. There's a really good book from Cambridge, which is called Vocabulary for IELTS. And I think you've got intermediate and advanced. It's got lots of topical lexes in it, which you can develop. So topics on education and lots of collocations there, and maybe some useful idiomatic expressions and even some idioms that you can use in speaking. Because speaking part 3 and writing part 2 are very similar topics. Vocabulary for IELTS, Sadia. 2 levels, one is intermediate and one is advanced. Good, I think you had a good look at this website. A webinar for speaking, we pass it on. A checklist for you. Now, this is something you can maybe familiarize yourself with when you practice, that you just quickly check, have I written about 250 words? How many words per line? I normally write, that's 10, okay. 25 till 27 lines for writing task 2. Yes, that is the right book, Cambridge Vocabulary for IELTS. Yeah. Oleg, I have it on my desk bar in IELTS, but I've never opened it. So it's American, right? I don't know, but I've heard it's a good resource. Good. Have I got my opinion in there? That is so important. You need that in every essay that you write. Yep. Is your information ordered logically. Now, what I mean when it's logical, when I read it, do you give me a topic before you explain, and then you give me an example? Don't start with the example. In English writing, we never do that. We start with the context. What are you talking about? Why is that important and relevant? And then you give an example. That means logical. When I speak about progression, which is also in your band descriptors, we talk about introduction, body paragraphs, conclusion. That's how we write it. Then as well, your paragraphs well structured, so you present one idea, do you give a reason and an example in that paragraph? And also, have you used linking words to connect your sentences and your paragraphs together? And organize key points into paragraphs. So have you got one idea per paragraph? Mohammed, this booklet is used in Saudi Arabia in lessons that we do face-to-face. And in Iran, we don't have those classes from IDP. So that's why you can see some Arabic translation in there. Good. Last thing, please check for your own mistakes. You know what you normally do wrong. So you need to have the discipline to quickly check that you've not made that mistake in that writing. Yeah, so I know, for example, that I make a lot of errors with your email, because we don't say that in New Zealand. So I don't type it. So I always want to check, oh, God, forgot it again. And I know that is one of my weaknesses. Yeah. So that's really important. Check what you feel you often do wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. It might even be better. Good. Call IDP and ask for a speaking webinar team. It's completely fine. And Yola, I don't think there's any speaking webinar planned this month. Yeah. Good. These are things that you need to be aware of. So just quickly check when you practice, and in the exam, have a minute or two to check those mistakes that you commonly make yourself. I think I have got one more quiz for you, and this is really a summary of what we did today. So if you have time left, feel free. Type in the words in the chat box, and in a minute I'll show you the summary of my webinar. I really hope you got some information out of this. Oh, that's nice to hear, Amna, that you found it very useful. I don't know, webinar 1, I don't think we recorded any of the webinars, are you? No. No, we don't count grammatical mistakes, because if you write 150 words compared to 250 or 300, it really is that overall holistic approach, looking at how does it relate to what you have written and what's the impact of the errors you've made. Reasons, examples. Oh, I see some answers as well. Yes, that's fine, Deepak. Yeah, just put a little line there and continue. Paragraphs, opinion, academic writing task 1, Ouija, go to your email. There's a Dropbox link in there. Oh, let's have a look then what you've done. Analyze, see what you need to do, understand what you need to do so you can answer all those essential components. Give me a clear opinion, give me a reason for that one idea that you have, and give me an example, and in the next paragraph give me a reason and example for that next idea. Yeah, so that means the ideas are organized in logical, well-structured paragraphs. One line blank, Alice, between your paragraphs is fine. And of course, with that, you want to use a range of vocabulary and grammar that is appropriate. And I think this is really where you get the difference between a 6.5 and a 7, because a 7 has much more understanding of register. Is it appropriate? Can I use it in this context? Is it well collocated? Yeah, and this is often, it's not that IELTS only offers 6.5. It's that a lot of students are just not at the flexibility of that language, Asim, because a 7 means that you're getting pretty close to native speaker level. Yeah, and that takes you a lot of weeks to go up to that level. They say about 20 hours of study to go up one bench score. Yeah, so sorry, 20 hours of study, 10 weeks of 20 hours of study. So if you go to school in Australia and New Zealand, to language school, 10 weeks, you can go up a bench score. But of course, that depends on how much effort you put into it, what your first language is. And as well, in the exam, if the topic that you get, if you know anything about that, because otherwise it's really hard. So I see a lot of people get stuck at that 6.5 because they haven't got that precision and flexibility with the language, which you will only develop by immersing yourself in English. Read, 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 read. And don't just read a cartoon, read materials of the level that you need for IELTS. The Economist, National Geographic, Psychology Today, The Guardian, that sort of language. I know it's boring, but that's the language you need to show us that you can do well in an academic essay. So vocabulary building and grammar is really a solid foundation for the rest of your test. Good. We pass on the request as well for a listening webinar. I've passed it on to Ayo. Let's see what happens. Thank you, team. Good. Any more questions? Let me know, because I think we've sort of arrived at the end of the webinar. So let me know if there's anything else you want to know. Cambridge Academic has indeed those books with all old exam questions, but you can also go to the website that you see here, idpielts.me. On there, you find practice tests as well, to speaking, to listening, to reading, and to writing tests with the answers. There, at the moment, Bangay, I don't think there is a listening webinar organized. Yes, please, Ali, opinion, always. Will, when is the next webinar? I think we're going to have a break this month. We'll let you know. I don't think it's in September. Oh, there is a countdown. Oh, you're 26th of which month are you? Of September. So the end of this month, there is a countdown webinar, which is just summarizing all the skills in about 2 or 3 hours. Yeah, so it's a bit mad, but it's very useful to put the dots on the I. Virginia, all the best. Go for it. And I hope this webinar has helped you gain a little bit more understanding of what you need to do to achieve that task achievement. Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you all for your time. All the best on Sunday, or the 28th and the 21st. How exciting. And I cross my fingers and my toes for all of you, because you really have put the effort in by listening to me waffling for 2.5 hours. So thank you so much. All the best. And keep reading, keep exposing yourself to English until you go to the exam, because that will really help you.